Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. I would like to call to order the Board of Selectmen for the special joint meeting with the Board of Finance for Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. Time now 7 p.m.
Again, I'd like to welcome everybody also and like to open up our joint meeting for the Board of Finance of February 20th. Please join for the pledge.
Right, you're on.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think they're having some technical difficulties.
Yeah.
There. Okay.
I got
Oh.
kicked off.
You were here early and now you're still.
I did.
Listen, you know I'm going to call you out. I think we'll get back to Carver in a minute and Jen.
I apologize. You know what? It's on my email. I got Mr. Clayton today.
Hey, nice job today. I got to report. Good job.
Oh.
And I swear this time I'm going to vote for you.
How do you do it?
I keep saying I'm yeah, exactly. I was definitely a baby. Yeah.
You can't commit. You can commit, yeah.
For today's show.
Oh, so her back.
Oh, is it seriously?
I don't think she's moving around. But it's a fake back.
Oh, is it? Yeah, I don't know. What can we do?
All right. We just have to screen and I think we'll be all set.
You should really come more often. This is the best turnout we've had all year.
You've added them all. I don't think we had this.
No. Nobody pays attention.
Right.
All right. So I think we're set. It just takes for the screen to share.
You gonna go full screen on it?
I think I'm right.
So she closes that.
Well, you guys can see it this way too, correct? Not great, right?
Are you sharing the right screen?
It's a great question.
We do have two chairs down on this end. If somebody wants to grab them with two.
You guys switched recently to Google Meet, correct?
Yes.
I will.
Yeah.
Can you enable it so that they can?
Yes, Mary.
Yeah. that's what we're
Can
trying
you
to
get rid
do.
of the boop boop?
They
Because
won't
that's
be
gonna be
able-
happening all through it.
Then you won't know that you gotta add somebody.
Oh, I see.
It's her request.
I've had it pop up like that.
I can turn the volume down.
That's because I'm just thinking it's gonna be boop 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 the whole time. Just a little bit.
Can we automatically admit?
Yeah, you can do that.
Weird because it's, I just took this to show you,
So
it's presenting on my screen.
Very
Nice. Someone do it.
I think that Mary has to full.
There you go.
screen it.
I think that works.
Oh, we're getting there. Yeah.
From beginning.
From beginning,
She hits from beginning.
Mary? What? You hit-
From beginning.
Play them slides.
So you're sharing your screen. So
Top flashing.
All the teachers are telling Mary how to do it.
Upper left-hand corner.
yeah. But it's the share screen. It's not right click.
Yeah, there you go. Looking good.
Thank you, sir.
Hi.
I did.
It's the Darlene Foster
Is
Show.
she gonna present? Look
It's
at
the Darlene Foster Show. Starring Darlene.
So
Jen is a problem
that's
solver.
her.
Oh,
There you go.
There it is.
Thank you, Jen.
There.
And I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Clayton now that we have our technology issues resolved.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name's Scott Clayton. I'm the current chair of the Bethel Board of Education. I think I pretty much know everybody here. I've been on the board since 2009. Brad was gracious enough to say that if I do a good job, I can be on that side of the table next year. So
I didn't say next year. It's
Oh, it's like in the future. My apologies. So nice to be presenting in front of 4 former Board of Education members, all I think who I served with on the board. Like I said, I've been on the board since 2009. 3 different superintendents. This is a labor of love, I think, as I've shared with most of you in previous years. As a board member, having the good fortune to hand 2 of my 4 children their diplomas, when they graduate, certainly a highlight. Looking forward to handing my other 2 children their diplomas. I am also a graduate of Bethel Public Schools. And so I have a vested interest here in the community. And since basically context is everything, aside from a few years in college, a little bit of time living at Fort Jackson, little time early on in my marriage, I spent the overwhelming majority of my 50 years here in Bethel as a resident. As a matter of fact, I shared with Mr. Lennon a couple weeks ago when we did our building tour. I think I'm the last group of students to have gone to Center School. Which some of you probably know where that exists.
And I found that hard to believe.
Right, true story, true story. Where I had Margie Price as a kindergarten teacher. The very night that I became chair, back in December, I think I said the words, it's our responsibility. One of my goals is to provide the best possible education to our children without breaking the banks of the taxpayers or shortchanging our students. The board engaged in an extensive deliberation of questions and answers, more than 50 questions. Some had multiple parts, everything from staffing, supplies, insurance, copy machines, and my least favorite, unfunded mandates. When you look at the mission of the Bethel Public Schools, I'm not going to read it to you, or I'm sure you can read it for yourselves. I will note out a few just important words and phrases: excellence, achievement, collaborative, rigorous teaching and learning, opportunities for all learners, and positive contributions to society. These are hallmark principles of our organization, and for the most part, really, our job is to prepare children for their future careers. The story. The typewriter here is symbolic to really just reporting of the facts. That's really what it comes down to. And this budget does just that. There really is no fluff here. It's just a reporting of the facts. And we have some not very extensive budget goals and budget drivers. Maintain our current curricular and extracurricular programs, maximize our resources to support fiscal efficiency, and we need to support the needs of students with disabilities and our multilingual learners, which you'll hear more about later on in the presentation. With our goals, we have some particular budget drivers that affect our decision-making. We have contractual obligations that we are required to meet. We have had an increase in the number of students with disabilities, multilingual learners who you'll hear more about, have more complex needs. General inflation, and as I said before, new legislation and unfunded mandates, something that I believe I speak to just about every year at our town meeting or our public hearing. Projected enrollment is a big part of our school's story and where we're going in the future. You will see the numbers shortly, but honestly, anecdotally, if you haven't been paying attention to what's going on in town, then I'd say you've been hiding. Just drive through Greenwood Avenue at 5 o'clock or drive by Target around the same time, and you'll realize our town is growing. And to quote a New York Times story on Bethel from April 30th, 2000, the quote said, "Some residents are worried about maintaining their town's quality of life in the face of growing developmental pressures." And that's from the New York Times 24 years later, just about 24 years later. So not really much has changed.
So I'm going to pick it up here and talk just about our general enrollment in the increases year to year. This is not a new story. I know that you're aware that we continue to see rising enrollment. We're gaining between, over the last couple of years, 60 to 40 students per year. Up until, and the numbers here include all the students we're fiscally responsible for. So when you look at like our state data, like our PISA data, October 1st, that only captures, for the most part, kids in our schools. But this includes students that go to the VOAC schools, our public schools, the students that we have in district place. All of that is included in here. So we still continue to see rising enrollment. I think the difference now, and we've talked about this as a group, is that we have to really start planning. As we look at some of the new developments that are coming online and will be coming online within the next year. I just drove by, it's not Copper Square, it's called the Grand. They're already taking leases for 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. You know, when you look at the development through the community, we really have to start engaging in comprehensive planning. And this is not just an education. Our first selectman and I have had many conversations about this. There's lots of aspects to the communities that's going to develop. You know, so as we move along, it's going to become increasingly more problematic. I think what's changed somewhat in our dynamic is that we now have more students that are defined by the State Department of Ed as being high need students. And traditionally, a high need student requires more support so that they can academically achieve at the same potential as other students. And this is just a graphic that actually comes from EdSite, which is of the state on the state of Connecticut's website for data. And what you'll notice is that over time, what has happened is we're starting to see a shift between almost a 50-50 balance between students that are considered like typical students and those that are considered high needs, or students with disabilities, multilingual learners, and students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. So we're getting more kids, but we're also getting more students that have more complex needs at the same time. As Mr. Clayton said, we continue to grow with our number of students with disabilities. Last year, when I was presenting, we had 522 students. As of October 1st this year, we had 549 students. And what's interesting about the shift is that we're seeing more kids that are coming in with more complex disabilities. You know, kids that might be classified as multi-handicapped or require a lot of different types of related services, autism, those kind of severe populations. I believe at Berry School at the beginning of this year, we gained 22 new students that needed to be in more of a self-contained environment. And that was after September had started. So just people moving into the community that have these complex needs. Now, I will tell you, we have had to add staff to meet those kids' needs. We are ethically obligated to provide the needs of the students and morally obligated, but we're also legally obligated to provide the needs of those students. So this school year, just based on who moved into the community, we had to add an additional special education teacher to the budget, and we had to add a 0.6 speech and language pathologist just to meet the IEP, individualized education hours of our students for this year. Now, we were lucky because, I don't know if this is good or bad, but we were lucky. But because we've had an increase, and we were able to pay for that because we got an increase of the IDEA grant. So there, you have in your packets a revenue page where it lists what the grants are and how much they've increased. So were we able to fund those extra positions this year using that grant? But going into next year, we're going to need an additional special education teacher at Berry School. And again, that is because we have more kids with much more complex disabilities to meet those needs. And the other, one of the other budget drivers in special ed is just increased transportation costs. I've talked about this year after year. You know, we could have a student who's out of district place and their transportation costs are more than their tuition. So, you know, they're ranged anywhere from $300 to $600 a day just to transport them back and forth to school. So you'll see that. In terms of our actual out of district placements, those are about stable. She's given me some pointers as I do this. Those are about stable. So tuition lines are not as, you don't see as big of an increase in tuition lines, but we definitely had needs with out of district transportation. What has also increased is the number of multilingual learners. So when I started here, I think we had about 80, 2014. As of October 1st, we had 234. What again is different about what we're experiencing now that we didn't experience when I first started in Bethel is that we're getting a lot more kids that are of older age. And what has happened is that in many situations, especially if they're old, during COVID, they had no instruction for years in their home country because schools just shut down. Like, I'll give you an example, like Ecuador. So they have their last educational placement may have been in 3rd grade, but now they're in 7th grade. And they have missed 4 years of education. And it's not because they have a disability, it's just simply because they had lack of services during that time frame. So we're seeing a huge increase of numbers at all ages, but we're also seeing a bigger gap in terms of especially literacy needs. Because they didn't, there's a very strong research correlation between the quality of education in their native language, meaning the quality of schooling in their home countries, and then the transfer into English is much stronger if you have a good foundation in your native language. But because they haven't had school for 4 years, now they're coming in and their needs are much more intense. So another thing that you're going to see in this budget is an additional multilingual teacher / literacy specialist at Bethel Middle School. Because we have a number of students that can, I'll give you the spoiler, there's 2 FTE increases in this budget. You just heard the 2. But because there's a number of students at Bethel Middle School that are not being served because of the gaps that they're having. Our free and reduced lunch population is up slightly. You know, I would say it's kind of where it was pre-COVID in terms of 31.9% of our population. We have something called direct certification, meaning if somebody gets Husky or they get SNAP, which is our food stamps and programs, then they directly certify to get free and reduced lunch at school. Now, the increased guidelines, which I think is a good thing, have increased slightly because of inflation. So that's probably another reason why we're seeing more. We don't get a lot of paper applications, which is sad. I think part of this too is, I don't know if you remember, but for years, the state actually paid for breakfast and lunch for all our students for, 2 or 3 years. And now they actually continue to pay for breakfast for our students. But it's, the percentage hasn't changed that drastically. So this budget, in terms of what it contains, in terms of additional headcount or FTEs, is 1 special education teacher for every school, given the complex needs, and that multilingual teacher, the multilingual learner teacher.
So Dr. Carver and I had I think a genuine discussion about whether or not we're going to show the next couple slides. But it's for a couple of reasons. One is to highlight some challenges, but also to share some successes. And really the next couple slides should probably be on the same page so you can see the context. You can see the difference here, where Bethel ranks, district reference group, where we are in terms of our per pupil expenditure compared to towns of similar demographics as Bethel. We're 20th out of 24. The difference between Bethel and Old Saybrook is just about $7,900 or so. In comparison, when you look at how we perform, given our challenges, this is a tremendous success. And it's really a testament to the words that I highlighted in our mission statement about, rigorous opportunities for all. And really the credit goes to the staff that really works hard. And as I said, having been part of the equation for several years and 3 different superintendents, we really have learned to do quite well with a lot less. So, teachers in the room really should be proud of themselves, any administrators, for really doing a yeoman's job and putting Bethel on the map for our achievement, and really showing what we can do. Now, additional comparisons. The local media likes to showcase how we compare, how towns compare, and it's really not even a competition. Bethel being Dirk D, every other town aside from Danbury, which is Dirk H, New Milford is D. Every other town is B and A.
Which
and
means they're the highest.
they're the highest incomes, and if you can't see them, it goes from right to left. Region 9, Reading, Easton, Richfield. Region 15, which is Southbury, Middlebury, is B. New Fairfield is B. Newtown is B. Brookfield B. Monroe is B. And that's the regional comparison. Looking beyond that, again, showing the regional accountability. And if you're not familiar with the accountability scores, the state measures, it's something like 17 or 18 different categories. You can go to EdSite, you can look up any school, you can look up any district in the state of Connecticut, and there are various parameters by which the state evaluates schools and school districts and their levels of achievement. Again, another example of where Bethel shines, and we do a really good job with the various challenges that we have. So this is another reason to celebrate the outstanding work that our schools have been doing. My two older children in particular, both dean's level students at the universities, and it's something that we're really proud of, despite the fact that we do have some challenges.
Another thing that's been, keeping me up at night is the number of legislative mandates that came last session. There were more legislative mandates in my 31 years in education. I just listed some of the more costly pieces here. The Right to Read Act, which requires districts to purchase literacy curriculums, which we did. And we used grant money to fund all of it. We used our ESSER funds to do that. Potential HVAC requirements that are going to not only require assessments of your HVAC systems annually, but there's a big 5-year assessment that has to occur before January of 2025 if it doesn't change in this legislative session, which could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're actually not sure what it costs. Another big change was that the special education age changed to through the 22nd birthday. So let me explain that. So previously, we were legally obligated to service our students with disabilities till their 22nd birthday. And if their 22nd birthday, that was their last day of school in essence, and then they transitioned typically into adult programs into the community. This new legislation requires us to keep them through the whole school year of their 22nd birthday. I will tell you this year, it cost us $250,000 of unexpected expenses this year and the law, by the way, was passed in June after the budget passed last year. So it does have a significant impact on kind of where we are. Another thing is that they changed the kindergarten age. And the actual issue for us, and I'm not going to go into depth like I did at the Board of Ed presentation with it, but the net effect of that is we're going to have to service our students with disabilities for an additional year in preschool. So the way we're managing that is we're actually going to be reallocating 2 kindergarten teachers into preschool to be able to service the students that have that need at that preschool level. And to be fair, we're going to have a smaller number of kindergarten next year. And for those that don't know, the age date changed from January 1st to September 1st. Oh, sorry. That's okay. And then the last was changes in excess cost and education cost sharing. I'm going to talk about ECS a little bit because I think even though the governor's budget that just came out kind of pulled back on some of that, I am pretty confident that that's not going to happen. I think our delegation has been pretty clear, and I think across the state that ECS will remain intact, but the town is receiving more money in revenue for that. And what I'm a little worried about is excess cost. Now, excess cost won't necessarily affect the bigger town budget, but it could affect our budget because this year it was, I think you might remember that we were put into tiers in terms of reimbursement caps, and Bethel was at an 88% tier of reimbursement. And what was that we were actually funded at like 70%, not even close to the 88%. So there is a bill that was put forth for this session to get that budget back to where it should be to fund the tiers.
Back to the 88.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. I have a hard time believing, Nick, that they're going to get to the 88.
That's better than 7.4.
Yes, it is
70.4.
better than 70.4. So
Did we get the 76% the year before?
yes, we
Yes.
got 76 the year
We
before.
got 70 this past.
That's correct. After we were so hopeful that they actually increased it to a higher amount but it didn't really pan out. So in terms of grants, I want you to know, we talked about this with the board. I'm sorry. $257,693.
For how many kids did that affect?
That was for 3 kids.
322.
But then went to over 400, right?
The total cost of the 3 students was $444,559.
But it was a $200,000 change.
That's right. Because what happened is that we would have paid part of that because we were going to keep the students till their 21st birthday. But then we had to keep it till the 22nd birthday. Thank you. But we would have had to keep it till the end of the year. So
How much was the kindergarten increase? How does that affect us with those two?
it's a net zero because
Because
we're
you
just moved
reallocating
staff around,
2
right?
positions into preschool to meet the needs of preschoolers. So it's a net zero.
But still, all those things on the list is almost $2 million.
Oh, yeah, that's correct. So thank you. So I do want you to know, because we've heard a lot, we've read a lot in the paper about districts kind of going into this fiscal cliff because of not planning for the end of the ARP money. And I assured you through the whole time that we were not going to be in that position, and we're not. But what we did have to do, and you're going to see it in the total amount of FTEs, and I know this is going to sound confusing based on what I just said about excess cost, and I'll explain it. But we got a significant, even though we didn't get as what we wanted, we got a significant amount more of excess cost this fiscal year. The board, upon my recommendation, moved some of the positions that were in the ARP grant to the operating budget because we would have had to have the positions either way to meet the legal needs of our students. So we moved them in at the beginning of this school year. We are reducing one position that was funded by our BESSER, but we did spend the majority of it on non-salary items like the literacy program, technology, infrastructure work. HVAC was a huge part of the work that's happening right now at the high school. That was a big part of the
Was that the
Chris.
500,000 reading program? I'm sorry, is that where you got
reading
the money
program
for
was
that?
actually 685.
I thought it was 5 and change.
No,
It's a little more than 6.
yeah, it was a little more than 6, but it was all paid through grants.
And that grant is going to continue every year once they give that to you?
No,
So how are we going to pay for those positions next year?
no more positions.
No positions.
No
So one time
positions.
it's
There was only one left in the grant, and we eliminated that position.
Okay.
They spent the majority on
On
salary
things,
items.
right,
Yeah.
maintenance
correct.
issues. Okay, I'm sorry.
And if you want to, I wasn't going to go into it now, but I think you've seen it. There's a detailed list of the expenditures on each of the grants on our financial dashboard. So if you want to look to see every item that the grants were spent on, you can definitely look at that. So for Bethel, we didn't have a fiscal cliff. We have managed it. The good news for Bethel is that Bethel saw a $688,000 increase in revenue in terms of excess cost sharing. And that money is supposed to be used for education to offset the cost of education in the community. So that was a really good thing that happened in the last legislative session that will really support, I think, our work together as a group. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is we've gotten a lot of other grants that typically we come and talk about, like these needs around mental health and mathematics and different types of things. But we've received the Right to Read grant, which helped pay for the reading program. We have a dual credit grant, which is actually going to expand to our culinary program at Bethel High School to be more of a service oriented as opposed to what I call a home ec program. So it'll work towards that. We received a primary mental health grant, which provides services for K-2 early intervention. We also we actually got 2 mental health grants. And the last thing that we wrote and received this year was called a high dosage math tutoring grant. And so that's being implemented at Bethel Middle School, and we're able to serve about 143 students that will get tutoring as a result of that in mathematics. So we had a really good year for grants. So in terms of the summary, as you know, 85% of our work is in people, right? It's in salaries and benefits. And everything else is just a small amount in terms of the overall impact to the budget.
So here's the big reveal. Board of Education, adopted budget proposed here in the Board of Finance, 54,751,132 represents a 2.99% increase, spending just north of 1.5 million. We haven't gotten to the 460 account yet. That's coming along. In my estimation, as the board chair and someone who's again been on the board for a long period of time, I believe this to be a very responsible budget. At this time, there's no fluff in it. You'll look through the line items. There's a lot of zeros. There's a lot of negatives, meaning reductions in spending. And I think that's a testament to the hard work of the administration in knowing what our needs are in the greater community.
So even though there's pluses and minuses on this particular graph that Jen put together, all of the increases, the 2.9% is all in salaries, contractual salary obligations. There are no increases in any other area. You're going to see movement between lines, but you're not going to see increases in any other lines. It's all in salaries. That includes the 2 additional positions that I mentioned at the beginning. We were lucky to be, we're in our 2nd year of health insurance. As we talked about last year, we had a great amount of savings going into last year. And I was anticipating, and I shared with both the chair of Board of Finance and for Selectmen that we may have more by the end of the year. We did. And so even though the increase was at the cap at 14.5%, it just gets us to the level that we don't have to increase in health insurance this year. So I think that was very fortuitous and lucky of us that we can see years of savings in that. But really the spending is all in contractual salaries. Okay.
And if you look at the regional increases, so looking at this particular slide and going back, 7 or 8 slides with the per pupil expenditure and the achievement rates, our increase falls significantly below our regional partners, even though we generally try not to compare ourselves to them, giving our particular challenges and compared to their perceived lack of challenges. Maybe 2.99% puts us the lowest in the area, notwithstanding those districts who have not presented yet.
So before we go into the 460, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions.
Good. Dr. Chopper.
Dr. Carter, thank you again. You guys understand the tremendous. It's always helpful. I'm sure it's always helpful. Can you had talked through 2 increases in FTEs.
Yep.
The detailed budget proposal looks to show 7.
Yes.
So can you reconcile that?
Yes,
for
I
me?
can. So they're the ARPA positions that were transferred to the Board of Ed budget this year. So we always compare it to last year's FTEs. And so the 4 or 5 paraeducators, 5 paraeducators, this.
Five.
Oh, 5, that's right. It's 5 paraeducators and the special ed teacher. And we moved somebody from other. That's right. And then there were a couple of little movements between those 2, but some of those were from those special ed positions that were moved into this year's budget.
So I apologize, I'm not following. How then do we think about it in terms of FTEs? It's not, it sounds like it's not really two. It's.
It is.
Yeah,
It's two because compared to this year,
but that's what this, well, maybe I'm not looking at the chart correctly. The chart
Yeah,
says
there was
this year, fiscal
the-
year 23 to 24.
So the Board
It's
of Education,
417.3.
Yeah.
And next year it's 422.
so what's not on here is that the Board of Education voted to add the special ed teacher and the 5 pairs into the budget after
the budget was
the
passed.
budget was passed last year. So in late summer or August, I forget.
I think it was
exactly.
September.
Yeah, September.
So if I'm looking budget to budget,
Correct,
it is 7.
correct,
Got it.
correct.
Post budget,
It's
your
2. Correct. I knew it was confusing. It is confusing.
Thank you.
Anybody else on our side? I don't think you. Well, Cynthia?
I was just curious, is there like an overlap with the multi, because you have now the multilingual and then have that deficit, and then you have special ed. Is there an overlap between those two groups?
Yes.
Yeah.
There
I
is.
was wondering.
There
you know,
is.
what that-
There are definitely students with disabilities who are also multilingual learners.
Right, I was curious about.
There
Just
is.
curious.
There is.
It's a great question.
And one more question. What is the tuition? Is it decided by the state?
Tuition for what?
Tuition for out of when you,
No, it's determined by the facility and the level of needs of students. So,
you being the facility,
what's that?
the
No,
school?
the school they're going to.
The school they're going
Each
to.
school has their structure based on the
Okay.
needs.
Correct. You're talking about for students with disabilities that are out of
Outplacement.
place?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Yes.
no place with people who come and pay tuition. Like there are some people who aren't there people who come to Bethel and pay tuition ever?
Well, that's based on the per pupil. It's based on the per pupil expenditure. So they would pay that. And if we don't have that.
Is that
many-
how it's determined? I know.
Yeah.
It's just a
We don't
question.
have that many
Yes.
people. And then,
Yeah.
and if they required any specialized instruction beyond a typical thing like intervention services or counseling or special ed services,
Right,
that would be additional charges beyond that.
okay. And so for the outplacement though, it's like whatever school they assign, that's,
That's correct.
What's needed.
That's right.
I
So,
gotcha. I gotcha.
you know, how many related services they might need,
Yeah.
physical therapy, occupational therapy, counseling. That would determine what the cost is going to be.
Okay, thanks.
I'd just like to say thank you in the 14 years that I've been doing this, starting in the Board of Ed through the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen. This is probably the most responsible budget I've seen in my time in these positions. And, you know, I think coming off a reevaluation that hit taxpayers very hard, some tough economic times. I just want to thank you guys. This is honestly, I think you've made our deliberations very easy. So I
I second
appreciate
that.
it. I appreciate it. very
Was that a
much.
motion, Brian? Is that-
Yeah.
I move to accept it and what I do now, I'm fine with it.
Should we go into the
Let's go to
460?
460.
Let's go.
Yeah, Very
Well,
trying to make minutes.
Very trying to keep up with this.
So the 460 has been problematic for a number of years. Every year we've come with a modest increase. You know, some years we've had a little increase or no increase, or sometimes gone backwards over increase. We wanted to give you a better representation of actually what we're spending in terms of the facilities and kind of what our needs are and why we're making such a significant request of an increase over the time. So this is a chart that Jen put together that looks at what was actually budgeted in terms of the 460 account and then what our actual expenditures were. So Jen, do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure. So I also did a 5-year average on this. So over the last 5 years where we have spending actuals, we're averaging about $600,000 a year in facilities expenditures. Some are a little higher than others. Some are, especially the year when we had COVID, we spent less that year because we weren't having school in session the full year. But the Board of Ed has, or the unexpended funds account has had to cover facilities expenses over time because our budget just isn't meeting the needs of what we need to do to keep our facilities running.
And thank God we had the grants. And I'll say that, I'm going to say that multiple times. because we had a lot of that COVID money, and Jen will tell you later that a lot of that was due to HVAC concerns, right? We're able to charge to the grants many of the things that we would have either had to come to you for, or find another way to fund, or go into the as Jen said, the unexpended funds account. So this graph,
Sure. So one of the things we have a couple of graphs in here that show the data in different ways. There are different things you might want to look at. So this one is sorted by our top spending categories. So, and this is the top spending based on the 5-year average. So consistently every year, HVAC has been our highest spending need in terms of facilities. Almost always over 200,000. Last year it was 282,000. Landscaping, which includes mowing lawns, it includes mulching, it includes playground mulch, which is becoming
Very
more and more expensive. And there's certain requirements by law about the depth of the mulch we need to have for safety reasons. That is also one of our higher expenses. That and things go up and down throughout the years, but our significant expenses include plumbing, elevators, alarms, roofs, etc.
and part of the issue is that we have a lot of things like an HVAC. The number that we talked about here includes our maintenance contract, but it also includes any repairs that need to be made. Plumbing, the same thing, right? Plumbing is not any maintenance contract, but it's really repairs that are being made. And what we talked about because people have said to me, well, we have town maintenance workers, right? And they provide some of the services, and they do provide some of those services. But just to give you a sense of like what we've had to dip into our accounts for is like since 2021, we had 93 work orders that weren't able to be completed by the town maintenance department. And a lot of that, or some of that, is because there's no licensed trade people on staff. So if it's a little more than a simple plumbing issue, it requires us to bring in a service contractor to do that work and to do that. And, I was having a conversation with Mr. Ellis, and he wanted me to have some examples. So I'm not going to read them to you, but these are some examples of.
And it's a little small.
Like BMS, the domestic hot water heater failed last year. We had to do some repair for a frozen heating coil on Bethel Middle School age 11, which was $16,000. You'll get a copy of all this, but the list goes on and on. So in terms of lots of different things, just in terms of elevator repairs, last year we spent about almost $20,000 fixing the middle school elevator. I told the story because it's kind of funny. Same girl got stuck in it twice.
Oh no!
And her mother was lovely. She was lovely. Because it just needed to be fixed. So like over time, these expenses have becoming more and more increasing in things that we are not able to manage in the 460 account.
So this slide is our traditional breakdown of where the funding goes, and our budget request here is 626,000, which is actually less than what we spent last year. So I know it's a large increase, but it is optimistic that we will not need to spend as much money next year as we did last year.
So this kind of looks at it in terms of the top categories. And so when you look at your actual budget, and the way the 460 account is set up is a little funky in my opinion. So there's 460B and 460C. One is preventative maintenance, and the other is any like time and material that we need to use to kind of bring in to fix something that might be broken. But if you look, this is just another data point to show you the differences that we've actually spent in each of these areas over time.
So we used a combination of looking at our historical trends. We looked at all of our maintenance contracts that we have in place and our understanding of what the needs are. And there's always certain things that we know something will break and want to fix it. We don't always know exactly what will break. So that's how we came up with these run rates and budget by categories.
So this is just another representation broken down by the actual categories in terms of the amounts. It's the supply accounts, those types of things. When you look at the largest increase, like it's really in lawn care, right? And it really has to do with that playground mulch. We're required by code, right? to have a certain amount of mulch, and it has to be a certain type of mulch that has to be refreshed every year. So that was,
Sometimes twice.
yes, right, depending upon the needs. So sometimes that's more, but that's in the these are all preventative maintenance areas, looking kind of the needs. And then this is what we call the 460D. And the 460D, it traditionally has been like for any type of campus improvements or things like that. But for those of you that went on a tour the other night and saw some of the facilities, so you actually got to see some of the things that need to be replaced. The automation system, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. All 5 of our schools have an HVAC automation system, and the software that runs that, I think at this point, 12 of 13 licenses have expired and need to be renewed, and the 13th one will expire soon. So we do need to renew that software license to keep our automation systems running properly. And if we don't do that, then if something breaks, then that's another thing we have to do to get it fixed. So we might as well be proactive on that.
The dumpster enclosures, several of our dumpster enclosures, it's actually a health department thing, need to be repaired. And at this point, we actually need to come up with some better solutions and replace some of them too. And then at the middle school,
So this was actually something that was in our budget last year that we delayed because we
Weren't able
save
to
money,
do.
yes. Which is replacing some of the broken bathroom partitions and refurbishing.
and then install a car use to get access for the recess door. And then the last one, our little circle of friends carpets. You can imagine what happens on them. And they're in desperate need of replacement. We think we have come up with a better solution. We have found a product that you can actually take the tile off and wash it. And then put it back down. We're gonna see how that works. But it does get a lot of use.
It's always mulch.
It's mulch. That's correct.
Well, you don't go that far.
So that, oh, yes, I do. I did not put in here the HVAC inspection. Originally we were going to budget for it. I am actually very hopeful because there's been a lot of talk at the state legislators that they're going to either push it off or scale it back. So I'm hopeful that we won't need it, but I've been assured if we do need it, we can come back and ask for it.
We'll deal with it.
We'll deal with it if we do need it. So that would have been included, that we did not include into the budget. So if you look at in terms of like where we are with the ECS increase, we are supposed to be receiving an 8 point for the overall regular budget. 600, to be clear, the increase in spending is 2.99%. So I want to be clear about that.
Okay.
But the offset of the ECS does provide us a little bit of relief. And in terms of the operating budget, it would bring us down to a 1.69% increase. So that is good news. And that's it.
Wow.
Try to be succinct.
You have a capital plan too.
Actually, that's a
That's right.
question.
Yes, please.
You had mentioned that you're updating the software on Selectmen or whatever controls you guys use. My question is though, you have that in your capital plan as well for 75,000. So I'm just curious, why is it showing up
This is
as?
for the middle school, right?
Yeah, no, he's right. They're both for middle school. So we did put this in the autumn. They're overlapping. You're right.
So that's what,
Yes.
yes.
So
The total,
is the total 150 or is it 75?
I have to look it up, but it is.
Because all I'm saying is if we pay for it
Get
in the
460.
capital and
Right.
460,
It's less.
it's 75,000 less.
Right.
135 and 175.
Do you know?
Oh, so.
We'll look it
The
up.
middle school was
The
35.
35 talks about the automation software license renewal.
These
Is
control
the
cars.
capital actual?
Oh.
Is that the actual controls themselves?
In the
valves
boiler
and
room.
everything?
Yeah, in the boiler room.
Well,
The middle school needs to be brought up in technology. Reference the control.
yeah, I understand. So whatever.
One is
One was software
All
and
right,
the
so I
other
get it.
was
All right,
hardware.
we answered our own question.
Okay, good.
Hey, Jen, thanks for getting back to us.
Thanks.
Thanks for getting back to us.
The tour helped.
Jen, could you get off Facebook and let's go back to the meeting?
because I remember that box.
It was great, right?
Well, it had magic in it. I don't know. Any questions regarding 460?
No, and I want to just from the bottom of my heart, just thank all the staff. You guys are all doing a great job. My kids are in there, you all know that, and you guys take care of them like family, and I appreciate it. So, and for the administration, just the 2.99 was a lot of hard work and decisions, and you're right. A lot of the average homeowners took a hit last year, and I appreciate you having them in concern. So, thank you very much.
So the last piece would be you do have a capital request as part of the admitted the capital plan.
So the HVAC was just put there as a placeholder if we get the grant, right? And then,
Middle school control panel, we just actually talked about.
that's right.
Brian School
That would
is on
be
there.
very important.
I know a little bit about.
There is additional work beyond the grant that has to be done in the culinary room. So the goal is to make it like a service kitchen.
In the high school? In high
Yes,
school?
yes. And many high schools now have like transitioned their old holodeck spaces to a place where we can actually work to develop the skills that kids are going to need if they actually wanted to work in the culinary hospitality industry. And I probably left because it was hip, but Mr. Chardy would tell you that. So what that means is that we have to take out all of those, I call them home ec stations, there's probably a better term for it, and put in a professional, stove and oven and things like that. So that would be approximately $100,000. And then the other thing is the generator at the middle school. So the generator at the middle school has been off since
About 5 years.
and so obviously that provides life safety if, and we would have to shut down school and evacuate school if we were ever to have a fire or
If the power goes out.
power goes out.
Power
Sorry.
goes out, that's.
I'm confusing it with the fire pumps.
Those
That
who
would-
did.
That wouldn't be
Would
good
be hooked
either.
up to the fire pump.
That's right.
And you
So-
have a carryover from the prior year high school league.
Yes, that's right. So those are on the capital items.
I just have one question. For the culinary, is it 50,000 or, I'm sorry, the price is 150,000 and the grant is 50 to bring it to 100, or it's 100 and brings it to
It's
50?
going to be closer to 150. When
Okay,
it's all
so-
said and
It's
done.
100 to
So this is already discounted because of the grant that might be
Correct.
available.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking that question.
Correct.
because I had-
Dr. Carver, looking downfield, I mean, it looks like we have some major
Correct.
repairs. I mean, we're
Your
looking at
roofs-
about 5.1 million.
Well, I recommend when you get to the point where we start talking about roofs, that roofs are reimbursable by the Office of School Construction.
What percentage?
Well, right now Bethel receives 46.7% reimbursement, around that 47% reimbursement. For long-term planning, I mean, we broke it up into different years. I would really recommend having a study done, looking at what a roof replacement could look like in its entirety, because you're talking about 3 schools at that point, and then writing a grant to the Office of School Construction to try to get the reimbursement for it. So those numbers, we don't even, they're actually old because they're very old, because it was before COVID that they came out and did those original recommendations. But those are going to be potential issues. Now, you'll remember that last year you allocated some funds to do some preventative maintenance, which we did. And that said they would buy us another 3 years, right?
Correct.
3 years.
The petroleum products.
Oh, I can.
Yeah, so hopefully, but when we get to that point where we have to start looking at like roof replacements, I think we should have a different conversation about what we want that to look like.
With a study and then
Yeah, I
applying
mean,
for it.
you would be silly not to
Of course.
apply to the state. And the real question is, do you want to do it one school at a time? Do you want to do it as one comprehensive project? I imagine it's going to depend on where you are financially at that point too. But those are considerations.
What's the variation in age on the roof spot?
Well,
High school?
That's a good one. High school's gonna be the first. And then it'll transition into,
Aren't there parts from 1970?
and then middle.
Yeah.
Because middle's got flat opposed to
geometric shapes at the high
Well,
school.
the high school's a flat roof too, isn't it?
High school, yeah, but you got it's a rolled roof and, it's a different type product.
Was it like a Firestone or is it
It's
a torch job? Like
Actually,
what they do?
yeah, it's a G something,
It's a
GMP,
glue knife.
no,
Yeah.
GMP or something.
Yeah.
Same thing as a Firestone.
Those different sections are different ages.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And what has happened over the years, different sections have been done, but now the timeline is all crazy now because some of them are reaching the end of
Yeah.
their life.
But you mentioned that the middle school would probably be the second one to do, or Berry School second? Some,
Berry would be the second. And then
the second,
then
okay,
finish
like
up
it
with
is on the plan,
Yeah.
just checking that. You know, if we wait to do the middle school, can we ever put that in with remodeling? Because that's gonna be probably due renovation in about 10 years. We're looking at here, can we push that
I don't
back?
think a roof can
Do that
last 10 more
together?
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right now, we have it.
That would be a
three,
good
four. We
question
have
to have
5
a
years
study
now.
about.
For a study.
Double that.
Oh, just curious.
But yeah,
Bob, who's your roofing contractor for you guys?
Offshore. Offshore.
Oh, I thought it was something.
The same thing. There's Silktown offshore. They're both companies together.
And what, the average lifespan of these are 15, 20 years?
20 years.
Yeah, and they're well beyond that.
Now, keep in mind, at middle school, Mr. Straight knows, this is the second roof. of the middle school. The first one failed shortly after we built.
Yeah, 5 years after, 6 years after.
Yeah.
But that's 30 years almost already.
Yeah,
And so they're reaching at the end of their life.
it was 1992, I believe, was open, correct?
Correct.
great.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. for
Well,
your-
now it's my turn.
Oh,
Okay.
Great job. I mean, everybody said everything, but you know, I love those days when you come run in my office, you're like, I have an idea of, you know, it's been incredible working with you on this budget, and I'm telling you, people here in Bethel are so lucky. And your staff for what you've done coming up with this thing.
Great staff.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Ron. Now listen, we're gonna talk about a fire truck. Don't anybody go anywhere. Someone get the door.
Thank
Fire guys are out.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Do
you.
you want to take a 5 minutes?
Yeah, let everybody, yeah.
So, actually, we need to do that. I make a motion that we take a 5-minute recess. All in favor?
Bob and John.
So go ahead and turn off the record and the volume.
You are doing very good.
Oh,
Yes, yeah, I think we're gonna get to tonight.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Gonna move back.
Yeah.